Everyone, welcome back to another episode of A Modern Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Tosha Anderson. I'm your host today. And today I brought not just a friend of the Charity CFO, but actually a client. So Nitzan Pelman, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, one of the things I love about the work that I do, so I'm a founder of this firm, right? And Nitzan is also a founder. And I love working with and talking to founders. We are in many ways, this firm, the Charity CFO, has only been around for about 5.5 years. And many times when I work with founders, their organizations are also very much in their infancy stage, right, of career, right? That maybe they're less than 5 years or less than 10 years. And I love talking with other founders because in many ways we can kind of relate to each other. We can have some grace in the growing pains and figuring things out and being creative about what we do. And I think Nitzan, you and I have that in common as well. You're the founder of ClimbHire. Nitzan, if you could just tell us initially in a few words, specifically what ClimbHire does.
Sure. We are an upskilling workforce organization. And there are a lot of organizations out there that do upskilling and workforce work. So I think what makes us pretty distinct and unusual is that we have an obsession around relationships and social capital as the way in which people will ultimately get middle class jobs and move from blue collar or below livable wage incomes into corporate jobs or jobs in tech, and most people get jobs through networks and relationships, and hiring managers hire people that look like them and talk like them and come from similar backgrounds. And so without kind of having a way to I'm sorry, I'm going to get my dog. Without having a way to sort of build those connections and rapport, it's very hard to break in. And so we, in addition to sort of teaching hard skills and soft skills, we do a lot of work to make sure that our community gets to know one another, the climbers themselves, and also we introduce the climbers to alum who have already broken into middle class jobs. They come back and they train the next set of climbers. So we have a near peer model of leadership and facilitation. And then lastly, we do a lot of introductions and volunteer events where the climbers get to meet middle class professionals and build networks and social capital as they're practicing a lot of the skills that we are teaching in the program.
Nitzan, I love all of that. Right before we started recording this episode, Nitzan, you and I were talking about how much I can relate to this because I am one of, I'm an accountant, right? And traditionally, I've done some research and they usually say that people that end up in accounting either have someone they know, right? So think family relationships or someone has networked or introduced them to the concept of working in accounting. And I'm sure this is probably similar for like engineering and law and, those sorts of things. Maybe my dad did it or my grandfather did it or my grandmother, whoever, right? Or they've also been generally, they've also been introduced to this particular subject matter in high school, right? Or maybe generally high school, because at that point, maybe you go into business school to focus on accounting. So I love so much about what you do because you focus on some of those careers that, unless you kind of know somebody or you've been introduced to, or maybe a family member has chosen that career or something like that, it tends to be a little exclusive. The schools to attend those programs are very expensive. Maybe there's not enough scholarships to go around. Maybe they're out of reach, or maybe people haven't even come across that. So I find that a lot too in the accounting space. I know you mentioned tech, but certainly financial services, accounting certainly falls into that same camp. Not enough talent, not enough people that know that this is a great, career. And I love that you focus a lot on what you call like middle class. So these are not entry level positions we're talking about. This is not, minimum wage jobs, right? I love that. So the training and placing students that you do is obviously really incredible in the tight job market. I mean, certainly I can speak for that. There's never enough accountants. And I know you hear all of these individuals saying there's not enough skilled labor out there. There's not enough talent out there. So this is a huge problem that I think just our global or if not national economy is facing. So what do you feel are the most important, or what is the most important to help applicants in this process? Like, how do you get them from no experience at all or no entry into the space or completely unfamiliar territory into being prepared for an interview?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many layers of that, right? Like, it is true that people without experience are going to have a harder time, breaking in. And similarly, to your point about like, where do networks get built? They oftentimes get built in high school, but they also get
Mm-hmm.
built a lot in college. And like think about what happens in college. Like you're living in dorms, you're in an a cappella club, you're on a sports team, you're writing for the newspaper, you're going to frat parties and sororities, and you're playing poker in the dorms until 3 a.m. Like just there's all these ways in which natural relationships are getting built, and those doors then can get opened like for many years ahead. So for our climbers, like that's not what their backgrounds are. That's not kind of the environment that they've come from. The vast majority of them either didn't finish college or didn't go to college, or I would say about half. And the ones that did, oftentimes were working like so much while they were in college that they didn't get to do those things, that the extracurriculars that are the relationship building opportunities. And so then they come out of college and they apply to jobs cold, and then no one pays attention to their resumes, and they end up in a retail job or in a gig contracting role or driving Uber or Lyft, or dropping off things for Instacart or DoorDash. And so and then they oftentimes get stuck. And our hypothesis is that there's all this talent that's lost out there because no one knows them, but they have a lot of grit and drive and aptitude. But I have to say that, like, now knowing the climbers in the way that I do, like so many of them come to us feeling badly about where they are in the world. They, either have been told through educational institutions, like, or teachers or whoever, like that they don't have a lot of potential, or they're not terribly intelligent, things that, just create a lot of damage. And then similarly, we're just not terribly kind to our, frontline workers in this country, the people that serve us pack our boxes at the Amazon warehouse, or serve us our coffee as a barista, or, stock our shelves and at Target or whatever. And so like they're coming to us feeling low, high anxiety, low self-confidence, some PTSD, mental health. And the biggest part of what we're doing is like helping people find themselves and believe in themselves and build that confidence to say, like, I can learn anything and I can tackle anything. And learning something hard is one of those ways that you build confidence. And it's why, like, we really put so much emphasis around creating community and creating relationships so that they can learn hard things together and they can support each other in those hard moments. So our signature cohort or signature learning track is the Salesforce Administrator Certification. And it's not easy to get it. And so they have to do, 10 hours of work on their own every week, plus 6 hours of class time. And in that independent work, like we have accountability buddies, we have pods, like they have alumni that are supporting them. There's so many ways in which they're getting a community of support that doesn't let them stop and doesn't let them sort of give up in these tough moments. And when they don't give up and they stay at it, they feel excited. Like they're like, wow, I didn't know I could do that. And that sort of allows them to start feeling and thinking differently about themselves. And the connections of people that look like them and talk like them and come from similar backgrounds and similar places of adversity, like that's also a place of strength, of like, oh, there's all these other people out there who have ambition and drive and motivation, but like have gotten stuck too. And so there's a lot of community building that we're doing that's really building the backbone of how people can then take on this work together. So I think that that's a part of it. The other part is practice. So you can't just teach somebody something and like tell them and then expect that like they know how to do it brilliantly and perfectly. Even the basic things, like when somebody asks you, is that in that first interview question, like, tell me about yourself. Like how you answer that is the make or break for the entire interview. And if if you've never practiced talking about yourself in that way, and you've been a cashier at Trader Joe's for 5 years, like, there's just words that you might not use that are part of a lexicon of, people interviewing for these jobs, they talk about their grit and they talk about their problem solving skills and their leadership and the way that they take initiative. And those are not words that everyone knows to use in interviews. And so we do a lot of workshopping and a lot of practicing, and then practicing within themselves, and then practicing with middle-class professionals that can give them real feedback on how they're doing. And in that process, they're also building confidence and sense of self. For like, oh my God, this is really scary. Like, I'm talking to this stranger, but now I've done it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and now I feel comfortable. And so by the time they get to that actual interview, they've like gotten those jitters out, they've built their confidence, and that sort of takes them into a different headspace and mental space, along with a skills space.
I love that. Tim, my business partner and I, are chief operating officer, we've often kind of hypothesized, we used to hire like one person at a time as we needed them in our firm, right? And we realized when you hire one person, they really, really, really struggle one time, right? Because they're just, one person at a time, they're completely on their own. They're surrounded by a bunch of people that seemingly are very comfortable in what they're doing. Then we started hiring multiples at a time, almost little classes. And it's really fascinating, the difference in the dynamic when you hire one person at a time that just feels kind of like out on an island by themselves, versus hiring 2 or 3 people at exactly the same time to start exactly the same time for the same position. And the camaraderie and some of the joint learning and just kind of leaning in on each other to, hey, this person can do it, I can do it too. There is so much to be said for that, at least for me. I don't know what all the psychology is behind it, but there certainly is something to be said about that community. So that's really interesting. And I'd love to practice too. I think that people aren't really given enough opportunity to practice things that maybe they're not immediately needed in their current job. I think about this during my career working in public accounting. It's a pretty cutthroat industry, right? Accounting has certain levels of like really basic and then more advanced. And then you get all the way to the top where it's more like presenting to a client. And like you said, practicing those skills to build confidence, absolutely huge thing. So, and I think that could be applied for any professional development in any business, but I think especially true getting people comfortable with something they really have had no exposure to. So
Yeah.
so kind of switching gears a little bit, because maybe you've learned some things along the way, certainly how you're developing your programs, very kind of innovative, thinking outside the box, how to help these people. But let's talk a little bit more about operationally within your organization. What would you say is thinking outside the box, different or creative in how you run your business that might be different from other organizations, operationally speaking, maybe?
Um, I mean, so I'd say one of them is that we walk our walk. We have 15 staff members at ClimbHire. We've grown pretty rapidly over the last 2 years. And every entry level role we have on our team is filled by a climber. So we have 5 out of our 15 are alum of the program. And we're really proud that they, are taking on those entry level roles with us. And some of them have already grown into the next role with us. So that's really exciting. I would say the other part of our model that is special and distinct is that we really lean into the assets of our community, and the value system of our community is that like everyone's paying it forward and that we're learning in community. And the reason for that, one, is a lot of things we just said, but also because we know that when people know each other, they have the opportunity to then refer people into opportunities themselves. And those things, we teach all of that. So, we say like, okay, if Tosha, you're going to have job openings. And if a climber comes in, and then in a year from now, like, you're going to say, wow, you're great. Like, do you have any more of you? And then because you're part of our network and our community, and we taught the ethos of like, once you get a job, your job is to pull in the next person with you. Now, like, they're thinking about that in a really active way. And in addition to that, the alumni come back and they train the next set of climbers. And so while we do have like a staff that does a lot of the training, like, they're really behind the scenes, and more of what they're doing is lesson planning and putting the climber and the alum like in the front of that classroom and in the front of the facilitation in small pods, so that it's really like peers supporting each other, as opposed to you like, getting introduced to somebody that, is has been a teacher for a long time, or,
Mm.
like is somebody that is a little bit more removed from where you are in life. So I'd say that's like a pretty different part of our model. And then operationally, we're lean, like we're not trying to build every single thing all at once. Like we're kind of,
Mm.
we think of ourselves in the way that lean startups think about themselves. Like we build sort of the minimum viable product to kind of get by at the size and the scope that we are. And then like when we have the next set of needs, then we, build that. And so, we had a fiscal sponsor initially, then we worked with an individual who like was sort of doing our back office, but we got, bigger, and now we're working with you guys. Like each stage, we sort of like take the next leap, but we don't, then plan for the next 5 years. We plan for the next year as a way to stay lean and stay nimble for this time that we're in.
I love that you reference minimum viable product and then also startup. It's so funny because I think in nonprofit world, sometimes we're asked to think about 3 years from now, 5 years from now. That's how many strategic plans operate, right? 3 to 5 years or something, somewhere in between. And it's really interesting because we are pretty rapidly growing as well. And I think very much similar spirit, have a kind of a startup vibe to us. Um, it's really hard to kind of think 18 months out, almost in some ways. You almost have to re-engineer your business. I tell a lot of my friends that are starting businesses or dealing with businesses, in even accounting firm owners, that will ask, Tasha, do you find that things work really well? And then every 6 months, those same things just stop working. And then you have to re-engineer something. I said, oh, yes, absolutely. So you have to keep retooling your business, within 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, it's constantly changing. So in that
Mhm.
spirit, so what are some of the struggles that you're dealing with right now, and what are you working on to overcome those to become more successful?
Well, so I see that the biggest thing, so first off, I should also talk about our results first, which sort of was the precursor. So
Yeah.
80% of climbers have gotten middle class jobs. The average income coming into the program is 23,000, and the average income coming out of the program is 66,000. So we're
Nice.
extremely proud of that. And we've had 3 cohorts finish and sort of hit those milestones. And we're in our 4th cohort now with a Salesforce learning track, and we're imminently about to introduce 3 new learning tracks. One in concert with Better.com, which is the fastest growing mortgage lending company in the U.S. We're going to do a customer success learning track with them. We also about to launch a big partnership with a bank that has yet to be named. We'll be training people on the test that people take before the Series 7 exam, which is the SIE. And then we have a partnership with Google and are doing a project management learning track with them. So 3 new learning tracks in addition to the signature one that we do with Salesforce. It's a lot of growth in a very short period of time. And I'd say our biggest challenge is that we have the capacity to serve like 5 to 10x the number of climbers that we are today, but the way in which we've recruited climbers has been on Indeed and Craigslist. And we have been kicked off of those platforms because we're a job training and not a job. And you really need to post the roles as jobs, not as job trainings. And so that's their policies. And so we, can't be on those platforms anymore, which is a real bummer. And so we've moved all of our recruiting efforts to social media. And that's just a very different beast, as anybody in marketing knows. Like it's a much harder process to sort of like find the right people, find them in that right moment when they're, trying to figure out what they want to do next and sort of catch them. And whereas like when you find somebody that's on a job acquisition platform, like it's because they're really looking for something. So I would say that's the biggest challenge, is that we need to start partnering with institutions like community colleges, other nonprofit organizations, city agencies like unemployment offices, career counselors, things like that. And that's just infrastructure building that we haven't done yet. That's going to allow us to serve the number of climbers that we could or are positioned to be able to serve.
Mm. that is the kind of re-engineering. Like, that's a big shift, the big shift in how you get program participants, and then, but seemingly successful so far, like you said, creating those partnerships with larger institutions to be able to get that. So that is some of the creative thinking that we have to do kind of in that entrepreneurial startup, whether it's for profit, nonprofit, it doesn't matter. So Nitzan, thank you for giving us a little glimpse into the life at ClimbHire, and a little bit about your story, and a little bit about what has been successful and what you're still trying to figure out. If people wanted to find more about you or your story, the easiest place to find you, is that the website, climbhire.co? Is there any other place that, might be helpful for people to look at some of your training opportunities, or maybe they know somebody, or
Yeah. I would say every time a climber gets a job, we celebrate them really like intensely in our community. And so if people want to, find me on LinkedIn, I, post about climbers a lot. And I find that like a lot of people tell us that they love those stories, they love reading them. So that would be another way to find me. And also, if you want to look for our website, it's ClimbHire is spelled HIRE. It's a double entendre. So it's climbhire.co. And those would both be great places to find me and the organization more broadly. And for those of you that are employers out there, I would say, if you're looking for entry-level talent with grit and drive and motivation that also come from diverse and hidden places, we could probably be a great resource for any entry-level role. We find that many employers hire people out of our cohorts, not even to do the specific thing that they learned, but more are seeing it as just a credible vetting process of finding unusually talented people from unusual places. And so about half of our people go into jobs that are connected to the certifications that they've just completed, and half go into jobs that have nothing to do with that. And they are in operations, marketing, finance, business analysts, operations, like everything. So if you are looking for entry-level talent, come find us.
Cool. And Nitzan, your talent is just in specific areas or nationally?
We do have quite a number of climbers who have relocated, but we're based out of the Bay Area. We also have climbers in Minnesota, Denver, Boulder, Los Angeles, Irvine, and Sacramento.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, Nitzan, again, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really interesting conversation. And for those of you that want to check out this podcast or any other podcast, make sure to subscribe to our channel, and also hop on over to our website, thecharitycfo.com. Subscribe to our newsletter, and you're going to get email alerts anytime that we have other conversations with other founders and CEOs. Until next time, thanks, everyone.